I work with a woman named Kristen, and because of the way that our work schedule is and the way that my personal life is, I see Kristen more than I see anyone else in the entire rest of my life. This is great in a number of ways. We get along really well, and we have a lot of things in common, but in the things that we have in common, like reading a lot, there are differences. Kristen engages mostly on a pre-critical level. If you ask her how she liked a book, she'll tell you things like, it made me sad, it made me happy, I liked it, I didn't like it, things like that. I tend to skip pre-critical thought entirely, which is its own issue, and I go straight from the stimulus to, this is the way in which the author makes people sad. And so we have some very interesting discussions, and I often have to define the things that I'm talking about because I tend to use a lot of critical words, whereas she doesn't. In one recent conversation, I was having to define self-efficacy for her, and so I told her about automobiles and how in America, at least, we generally grow up assuming that we're going to drive automobiles. Eventually, we're going to have a car, we're going to have a driver's license. That's something that happens as we become adults. And from that point forward, 16 or whatever, we're going to drive cars for the rest of our lives. But if you tell an American that they have to drive a tractor, they're freaked out about it. And that is a lack of self-efficacy. Even though tractors are much simpler machines than cars are, we lack the self-efficacy in our society with regards to tractors. A little later on that night, we were discussing poetry because I was in a poetry workshop this semester, and Kristen tells me that she doesn't read poetry, she doesn't think she can get it. When I talk about poetry and my frustration with some of my other classmates, she says, well, I know how they feel, I don't get poetry either. I don't know metaphors, I don't understand those things. And I said, Kristen, poetry is a tractor. And she said, well, maybe, but I still feel like I don't have the ability to understand those metaphors. And I said, Kristen, you just did. And it was one of the proudest moments of my life because I was able to illustrate how our society treats poetry and how our self-efficacy with regards to poetry is way out of whack, and people believe that they can't understand it. But also I was able to prove at the same time that Kristen and everybody else can understand metaphor, can understand these poetic elements, and can engage poetry. So I encourage you, please, to give poetry a chance. There's so much out there, so much poetry. It's been written for thousands of years. There's gonna be something that you enjoy, and something that resonates with you. Pick something that you think sounds interesting, like pick a poet and Google them. They're probably going to have some things online that you can read for free. It doesn't have to be a great poet from yesteryear. There's a lot of contemporary poets that do a lot of interesting things. There are urban poets, there are rural poets, there are imagists, there are beats, stream of consciousness people, there are really highly structured things, there are very loose things, there are villanelles and sonnets and just all kinds of stuff out there. So just read something, and I will see you later.